Sunday, April 14, 2024. Still no power. This is bad. The radio had said it might take a couple of days, and this was now day 3. This was the longest outage I had experienced since the Hidden Canyon fire 3 years ago. There were only local messages then, not federal. Now the water had stopped. The pumps must be down. Had they been running on emergency power? I was glad I had stocked up yesterday. I had maybe 350 gallons of clean drinking water that needed little or no treatment. The kitchen counters were covered with plastic wrapped and foil sealed containers of water. I had to put some of the bigger containers in the dining room. Water is heavy. It weighs 8.3 pounds per gallon, so a 5-gallon bucket weighs 41.5 pounds. I had filled the bigger containers using smaller ones. I also had the 85-gallon water heater and toilet tanks as reserve. And if needed, I had a swimming pool. It's a great asset. I had 15,000 gallons of utility water for bathing, laundry, and waste disposal. With the right treatment, I could also drink it if I had to. With no circulation or filtration, the algae will take hold. No sense to shock the entire pool. I'll just treat each bucket and disinfect with bleach as needed. I turned on the radio and got the exact same message as before about the power outage and a new one about boiling or bleaching water. The BBC ran the same basic story as before, but also mentioned efforts to isolate and fix the problem. I collected the solar-powered garden lights and replaced the AA rechargeable batteries with new ones that I had bought online. Then I set them out in the best spot to get all-day direct sun. I could use them as light and to recharge batteries for the radios and flashlights as needed. I also had a good supply of single-use batteries. I looked at my emergency checklist, notes, and inventory. There were holes, all the holes I had ignored or procrastinated filling. It was time to consider that this could be a long-term event, and I could fill in some of those holes at the grocery store. You never know what terrible event might happen. Asteroid strike, zombie apocalypse, yet another season of insane Housewives of Beverly Hills. You know, a dinosaur death, mass extinction level event. I got into the car to go to the grocery store, buy the tomato plants, and to see for myself what was going on down the hill in the world. Traffic was terribly congested. I thought about abandoning the venture, but just then there was a small opportunity to merge, and I took it. I was immediately sorry, and stayed that way for the next 2 hours. I inched along the few miles to the store, but it was closed and dark. The big sign on the door read, "Sorry, closed due to power failure. Will reopen as soon as possible." My next stop was to get the tomato plants. Traffic was at a standstill, and there were a lot of honking horns. I could see the intersection from the store's parking lot. I got the binoculars I kept in the trunk to get a better view. The signal was out, and there was what looked like an accident that had shut down the intersection and stopped everything. Other cars blocked parts of the intersection too. It looked like those drivers were arguing. Then someone approached and punched one of the drivers. In an instant, several cars emptied and a brawl ensued right there in the intersection. Okay, that's it. Enough for me, and I decided to go back home. I could still move around the parking lot, so I made my way around to the back of the store to where a cul-de-sac ended about 20 feet from the rear of the store. There were several small bushes, a lawn, and sidewalk to drive over. I eased up over the curb, drove along the sidewalk, past the bushes, and onto the cul-de-sac. I took it very slow, and I don't think I damaged my car or other property. I drove through that neighborhood, back to the highway, but was now on the opposite side of the road I needed to be on. The west lanes were clear because of the intersection nightmare, so it was no problem to cross them. The eastbound lanes were stopped. I asked permission of 2 drivers to cut across their lanes in front of them to get to my street. "Sure, no problem," they both said. I thanked them and wished them well. I crossed in front of them in less than 10 seconds, yet somebody started honking. Some people are nice and stressed, others not. Getting home was a lot easier than leaving. I decided not to drive my car out again. There was no reason or benefit. What a mess and waste of time. and I now had a headache. I got on the two-way radio for Fred on an agreed channel and time. This time he was right there. His power is out too. I said I knew that because I could see his area from mine. They had no water as well. He said he, his wife, and their granddaughter were doing okay. His wife didn't like it and had started complaining. That bothered Fred, and he told her to try to accept it, they'd get through it, and that her complaining wasn't helping. It's funny. He has a wife that complains to him. I don't. I have a raven, and I'm glad he doesn't speak English, and I'm glad I don't understand raven speak. I told Fred about the BBC information and the chatter. He said he had heard the same chatter on the two-way. I told him I thought this power outage and resulting situation was absolutely big, and that the government not saying much was adding to the problems. This is the stuff SHTF is made of. This is very different and very dangerous, Fred agreed. He hadn't told his wife or granddaughter, but he was making 72-hour plans, just in case this got out of control. I told him I was doing the same. We signed off. A 72-hour plan assumes that the crisis has gone on for 72 hours, 3 days straight. Depending on the nature and severity of the crisis, the population might be okay or along some gradation of disaster. If there is relief being delivered, help being offered, and directions from authority being given, chances are the vast majority of the population will be fine, and nothing too horrible will happen. If, on the other hand, there is no relief, no help, no instructions, the population will, statistically, be at the end of its food and water reserves, and society will start to broadly break down. Law and order will be greatly diminished or even cease. Just before the 72-hour time frame is the best time to bug out and get clear of the coming predictably dangerous environment. Sooner, and you run the risk of becoming a hyper Chicken Little, always ready to bolt out the door at the first sign of trouble. Later, and you run the risk of being trapped and caught up in the lawlessness and refugee hordes. Franklin was calling, but my head was busy, so I left a pile of food on the patio for him and retreated indoors to the office. I could hear him vocalizing his confusion as to my lack of interaction. Sorry, Franklin, but I'll make it up to you. It was time for an OODA loop written exercise. This is how you run it. What is the situation? O for observe. What are the variables? O for orient. What are the chances of each variable happening? D for decide. What is my response given the information I have and assumptions I make? A for action. O-O-D-A. Observe, orient, decide, act. Observe. There is no electrical power for 3 days. Rumor in the BBC News say it's nationwide. Now no water here. As far as I know, food and water are not being replenished, at least not here for now. There is no usable information or news from the authorities. Most people do not prepare, so their food and water is running out or already has. There is a lot of police and other first responder action. My street is calm and quiet, but the highway was a mess and in total gridlock. Most people that I saw were stressed, but the rules still applied to them. They were obeying the law and societal codes of conduct. Orient number 1. The power comes back on, everybody gets back to normal, and has stories to tell. Orient number 2. The power and water does not come back on, and there is no help from the government. People go crazy to get food and water. There's pillage and plunder, murder and mayhem. No police. Society breaks down. Everyone for themselves. WROL. Decide number 1. Unknown. Power and water have been off before. Rumors and first news reports are many times wrong. And there is little information from the government. I guess 75% everything will be okay before SHTF. Decide 2. Unknown. I guess only 25% chance this is SHTF time. Act 1. Shower, go to the post office and the grocery store. Get back to normal. Act 2. Stand and fight or bug out. Escape the violent madness that will be LA. So it is decided, 75-25. I would keep on here as normal as possible for now, but if Orient 2 happened, then I would move to Act 2. To be at all successful, I had to prepare for that. Pray for the best, prepare for the worst. I thought about my kids scattered all over the country. Bill Jr., the commodities broker in Chicago, Ruth, the lawyer in Denver. Only Brian, my youngest, still lived in California, in Bishop. He's an Inyo County Sheriff's deputy. It's hard when the kids grow up and move away, but they have their own lives. I assume their power and water were out too. I hoped they were okay. It's doubly hard when you are a widower. Mary was fragile. It was her vulnerability that gave me purpose. She would have taken this very poorly by now. Took a bucket bath with warmed up pool water. Ate a big salad for my sunset patio dinner and my usual bottle of red to splash all evening. There had been a lot of distant sirens all day. I guess not all traffic is stopped dead.